Hello everyone, thanks for stopping in and watching another one of my videos as I continue this journey of figuring out what to do on YouTube. So today I'm going to be working on showing an example of a project that I want to shout out Austin Williams yet again. He helped me bring this idea. He uses this with his Intro to Engineering Design class. Instead of the Charmed I'm Sure project. So instead of that, we are rocking with teacher nameplates, which I think is a great idea. And I'm actually working with my metal fabrication shop. So I work at Keefe Tech High School, and we are a vocational school. So my metals department is helping me create a holder. So I can hang these up on every single door in the building. So looking at this nameplate, I'm going to run through on how to design this so my students lock in if you are watching this, because this is going to go through all those dimensions and the little things to help you along the way. This isn't going to be perfect. There are some ways around some of this stuff, but this is going to be what I would say is probably the easiest way that I've been able to figure it out so far. Just want to get another video out there quickly so my students can have something to follow along with. So my goal is going to be to create this. Now, my example is going to have might not be exactly this. I'm going to try and show some different tools so my students can recreate some of those same ideas. So I'm going to open up a new part studio, and we're going to go from here. So I'm just going to create my basic outline using some of the dimensions. So I'm going to hit my front face, hit N for normal. I'm going to sketch that up. Let's get a corner rectangle in here. And the dimensions is a 9 wide by 4 high. And I'm going to extrude that a 1/4 inch. Might seem a little thick, but that's the size we need so our holder can actually grab onto it. And I'm going to hide all these axes. All right. Now, the main thing that we want to focus here on is a teacher nameplate. Well, I want the teacher's name. That is going to be the first thing I put on here. So I'm going to start, obviously, I'm going to make it for me. I'm going to sketch, and I'm going to use some text. I don't want to start in that corner because I don't want to be constrained there. So what I'm going to do is just click that top so it's highlighted. I'm going to drag out here relatively, and I'm just going to click. Relatively, that's what I'm going to look at. Now I'm going to put my name in. And I made it a little bit bigger just so we can see. Now, I want it to be bolded. Just pops that text a little bit more. And play around some font styles. And now this comes in a little big. Obviously, it's a little bit off. Luckily, I do want to drag it inside that face before I do anything. It's going to make my constraining and sizing that much better. The first thing I need to do, if we look back, so the restrictions that I have to place on this and that we're going to have to follow is there has to be a 1/2 inch all the way around, excluding the top. So on the left side, the bottom, and the right side, we need a 1/2 inch so that holder can reach around. So I'm going to hit D for dimension, and I'm going to dimension the left sides, and I want that to be a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to do the same thing from right edge to right side, and that is also going to be a 1/2 inch. Now that's coming in kind of big. A 1/2 inch is the minimum size. So I'm going to go back in and just say 0.6, 0.6. Actually, just hit enter. All right. And we can play around with that a little bit more as we go through if we want to make that a little bit smaller. But a 0.5 is the minimum. Now the next thing, depending on the teacher you pick, we're going to try and add in the departments that they work for. So I'm going to add some text in again. Now, I don't want to be aligned with that left side. I'm going to want it to be centered eventually, but I don't want to start the top left point in the center. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click at an arbitrary point at the bottom of the first name. I'm going to click, drag out, and then click again. I make sure you don't have it aligned. We don't want to have that constraint in there. You can always edit and get rid of it, but it's easier if we just aren't aligned with anything. Now, I'm a STEM teacher. I teach computer science, engineering, math. So I'm going to hit STEM. STEM is going to be my subject, and I'm going to hit my green check mark. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want this thing to be center aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this point, which is the middle of the stem, and I'm just going to drag it across slowly until it highlights that midpoint of my name. And I'm just going to release. Now, as I notice here, I can't move it left or right, but I can make it bigger or smaller. So the next thing I need to dimension is just the height of this thing. I don't want that to change anymore. I'm going to make it 0.6 high. I think that's a good height for now. We can always play around with that number as we go. Now, some of my extrusions are going to have different heights, but I do want the names to have the same one. So I'm just going to extrude that and I'll create another sketch for the rest of everything. Usually want to limit our sketches, but in this case, I'm going to differentiate between my extrusions, and this is going to be my farthest extrusion out at 1/4 inch. And that's what we got so far. So the next thing that we are adding, and we're just going to move around here, make sure you know how to navigate around. The next thing I want to put in here, for my school specifically, is our logo. So what I'm going to do, and I showed this in my previous video, is how to add a DXF file into Onshape and how to utilize it in our model here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Sketch, and in that sketch, I am going to insert a DXF file. I'm going to go to My Other Documents, My Owned by Me, as that's where I put my file previously, my DXF files, and I'm going to use my Bronco logo. When it comes in, it's really big. I'm going to do this quickly. If you need to, my other video is available. You can go check it out. I'm going to transform, and I'm going to make it super small. I'm going to have to move it around until I get it onto the nameplate. And you just got to do a little trial and error with this one here. I'm going to center this up as best as I can. It can be hard to get it exact, but I'm just going till it relatively look like something I would want. Make it a little smaller, raise it up. There we go. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go out and you got to click in that white space. Takes a second to render. We're going to zoom back in. And then my Bronco is right there. Now, this is where I've had a hard time trying to figure out how to make sure that this bottom point is a 1/2 inch away. When I've been trying to dimension just a point, it's been creating some problems for me. But if I try it, let's try it with this. I'm going to try to dimension the bottom arc to that line. See if we can do it this way. And we're going to try 0.5. But if I go in, see how that just does not work right. So I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to get rid of that dimension there. What I do want to do is I'm just going to create a line. I'm going to create a construction line. So I'm just going to create a line from here all the way over. And I'm going to escape. And I just want to dimension it to make sure it is 0.5. So I just need to make sure everything that I put is above this line. I'm just going to make it a construction line because I don't really need it for anything. And I know that right there, my Bronco's in a good spot. I like that size. It's not entirely at the bottom, which is totally fine. And it's not too close to the names. So I'd say that's pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude. I'm going to extrude that out. With this, however, it's not going to select the eyes, and it's not going to select the nose for my Bronco. So I'm going to do a solid. I'm going to select each little piece, so that's going to be the outline, and then I'm going to select the eye, and I'm going to select the nose, and I'm just going to let that be a 0.2 extrusion, not quite as big as the name. And that is our Bronco for the Keeftech Broncos. So that's using the DXF file. So the next part that I wanted to incorporate into this project is teacher interests. So the whole point of this project is designing with intent. So we want to take information from our teachers. They filled out a Google form for me, giving me some ideas. As you can see on my previous one, I had basketball and golf. I'm the school's basketball coach for the JV team, and I'm just an avid golfer. So I'm going to hit a new sketch because I want this stuff to be a separate extrusion. So I'm going to first start by creating a basketball. So the way I did this, and this is just to demonstrate adding some stuff in here, and I'm going to use a couple different tools. But I am first just going to draw a circle and relatively place everything. And I'm going to say I relatively want that to be 3.25, and I'm going to hit enter. Now, obviously, that diameter is now set, but I need to make sure that this center location is where it needs to be. So I'm going to dimension that first. Here we go. And I know that needs to be at least 0.5. I'm going to say 0.55 just to be safe. I do want to get it as close to that bottom, but to give it a little wiggle room. Now I'm going to do the same thing for center to bottom and say that's 0.55 as well. And that's the start of my circle. Now, I know that I can only do a quarter part of a circle. I don't want a whole basketball in there. So I'm just going to draw a line in there, a vertical line. I'm going to escape, draw another line, and go out. There we go. All I want is this piece. So I don't need that outside anymore. But we're going to leave it for now. So the next thing I'm going to do is just create some more pieces to this, just sort of have a basketball shape in here. And I see, remind myself as to what the basketball's looking like here. So what did I do? All right. So we are going to just start by creating a line. We're going to start on the figure and come over and then go up. Now, the only thing I want to do is I want to dimension this to make sure that's the same width. And we're going to call it 0.3. And let's do the same thing here. Dimension that to be 0.3. So that's just 0.3 by 0.3. That's just getting this little part here. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to get this as another aspect. So what I'm going to do, I clicked the wrong one, apologies, is I'm just going to create a little arc right here. So I'm just going to use a 3-point arc, and I'm just going to click here, and just give me some arbitrary point, and just get something, and I'm going to call this 0.9. This is just me eyeballing a basketball. It's not going to be perfect. And it is just slightly above for the next one. So I'm going to do a 3-point arc as well. Get another one in here. Let's call it here. Go around there. And this should be the same thing. Now I am going to want to drag this over, drag that across, and I'm just going to play around with this until I roughly get it into the shape I want. And then I'll dimension everything. So obviously the radius is already dimensioned. I'm going to dimension these points to just be 0.2 apart. And I'll do the same thing over here to be 0.2 apart. And what we got last? We need to just find how far I want the point to be from here. Which that is going to be, let's call it 0.9. Let's shift it up a little bit. And how far is that going to be from there? Let's call that 0.9. I hit the wrong point accidentally. Let's delete that dimension. I want to dimension the point from not the center, but from here. Stay consistent. I'm going to call that to be 0.9. That looks like a little much to me, so I'm going to bring that back down to 0.8. I like that rounding a little bit more than I did before. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to then create my basketball hoop. So I'm just going to move these dimensions around a little bit so I can get them out of my way for my sketching. Because the next thing I want to do is I want to sketch my little basketball hoop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I actually don't want to create a circle. I want to do an ellipse. And I'm still going to put it arbitrarily in here. I do want it to be parallel to the bottom. And I can just set it here. So we're going to say 1.25 and let's call it 0.5. I'm going to do the same thing with another circle. just slightly bigger than it and slightly bigger this way. So we're going to call that 1.4 and we'll go point, what is it, 0.55, 0.15 more. Let's zoom in a little bit. All right, let's do this 0.65. That looks pretty good. And now the next thing I need to do is just put in the net. So this is where we're going to use that spline tool and just to create my little curve. So I'm just going to start out here and we're just going to click a bunch to start to get a slightly basketball netted shape. And I'm going to move this around so it's spaced out a little bit. And that's my first spline. Now I'm going to do the same thing so I can get an extrusion piece on it. And this can just be some arbitrary size. I'm just going to eyeball it to roughly match. I could go through and put a bunch of dimensions in here, but that is not worth the while for this video. Now I'm going to escape. So here I got my basketball hoop. Now if I look at that, to me that's a little big for what I want. So if I need to, I can just highlight it, select that entire shape. I'm going to hit transform. I'm just going to shrink it down. I'm going to move it over a little bit, move it up a little bit. I want to try and maximize the space I got here. Got to click outside. That looks a little bit better to me. I know it's not to scale and all that, doesn't match up with that hoop, but this is generally what I'm looking for. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my little basketball. So I'm just going to put all these sports stuff for mine on here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my little golfing flag. So I'm just going to hit my little flag. We're going to call that 1.5 high, and we're going to call it 0.15 wide. And then I'm going to use my spline tool to create my flag. So I'm going to just click around here to get the general flag shape that I want. Give a few to make it look pretty good. That's not too shabby. I might move that around a little bit. And then the last thing I need to do is I need to create my golf club. So here, this is a new one that I've not gone over with my students yet. So if you are watching and you do want to create a rectangle that is slightly slanted, click the aligned rectangle. And I'm going to click. And this is essentially trying to create a slight bend to it. And I'm just going to click again. And I'm going to click. And I want that to be, let's say, 1.4, slightly smaller. And we're going to call that 0.15. And I'm going to use that spline tool one more time to create that golf club head. So I'm going to come out a little bit. And we're going to click and escape. So I have all my figures. Notice how these are all blue. We can go through and dimension many of these points here just so we know. As I remember, I need to be at least 0.5 from that bottom. And as I did with the other piece, I'm going to say 0.55. Now, some of this stuff is not going to stay with it, so we're going to have to make sure we check those dimensions as we go. And I'm going to say that will be 1.15. I don't mind the size of that, but I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller for me to make it look a little bit more like a golf club. There we go. That's a little bit better. I could bring in another DXF file and copy it from there, but this is just to show some of the different options that we have. I can dimension this piece here, get a little curve going. We'll just give it a value. And then there could be some more stuff we could dimension with it. I'm going to leave it as is, as dimensioning splines are still a little bit difficult, but we'll get to those eventually. And I'm just going to dimension this just so I know where it's at and it's in a good spot. And we'll leave it at 2.3. 1.3. We're going to say 2.3. All right, there's that. And then the last one we need to do is from the bottom here. And we'll call that 0.75. That's perfect. And the last thing I wanted to mention, just so we can have a good value in there, is just the center of that basketball circle. And we'll call that put one again, 2.25. And we'll go from the side here and we'll call that 2.5. I like to just give myself some nice good round numbers there. Now just to clean that up a little bit as some things got a little wonky as we went. I must have been giving the dimensions on these ones. We will do this. That should be 0.35. And let's go this way. Let's call that 0.9. And we'll make this other one 1. And we'll make the height of it 0.45. Escape there. So I just forgot to dimension those earlier. And we got my basketball hoop shape in, and all is well. So the last thing I gotta do is I just have to extrude all these features. I know it's been a long video. I'm trying to do this quickly, so I just maybe skipped over some of the nitpicky details. But the next thing is just to figure out the extrusions for all of these. So, as we notice, when I go back to this other one, my flag, my golfing pieces are all about the same extrusion, as well as the big parts of the basketball. Then the small hoop and the smaller parts are a different extrusion. So I'm going to have to extrude these in parts. So I'm going to select the pieces that I want to all have the same extrusion height, which is going to be those pieces. And then I'm going to hit extrude. And I'm going to give those an extrusion of 0.2. And I can hit my green check mark. I'm going to go back into that sketch and I'm going to select all the other faces that I want to extrude. Just those little basketball hoops. I forgot to add a golf ball. I'm not too worried about it. And I'm going to hit extrude, and then I'm going to extrude these pieces 0.1. Don't want those quite as much. Now to me, most of this looks pretty good. I could go back and fix that, but that's okay for now. What I do want to do is I don't like how blocky a basketball is. So, well, basketball is really round. So I'm going to go in and add some fillets in here. And I'm going to, and it's going to cause some issues because of how crazy that was from one of my previous builds. And I'm just going to go through and fill the rest of these. Make sure we grab all those edges, move around so you can see all of it. That looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I like that same size for the golf club. And this might cause me some issues, so maybe I might have to do a different one. Let's grab that. So not the best golf club, but I think we will rock with that for now. And I'm going to do the same thing because the flagpole is also rounded. And will let me do that? No, it won't. So we'll get rid of those. That's fine for now. And let's see. I think that's all I wanted to do with that. So I'm going to hit my green check mark. Those pieces are going to come in nice and filleted. And that is our teacher nameplate. Now we will print these. We're going to paint them up. And that will be that. Thank you.